Everybody, just another couple minutes to get on, and then we'll get started. Good evening, officers.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Good. So we're just waiting for a couple more people to jump on the call, and then I'm going to call the meeting to order and just walk through a few things, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. All right?
Sounds good.
Great. All right. It looks like we have most of our committee members here, and it's just gone 7 o'clock. So I think welcome everybody to the first joint Public Safety Committee and Environment Committee meeting. Today is February the 10th and it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to be sort of moderating the first portion of this meeting on behalf of Chair Weberink and Chair Laidler. Councillor Laidler has indicated he's just having some technical difficulties, so hopefully he'll be able to jump in on the call soon. Yeah.
He just texted me and asked if you could send another link for the Zoom to his Tim Laidler at Home's email, please.
Sure, I can do that for certain.
Thanks.
Then while I'm doing that, I'm going to officially call the meeting to order tonight. It's 7:02. And so, like I said, I'll be moderating the first portion where we have a presentation, and I'll do some introductions momentarily. But I wanted to thank the Conservation Officer Service of BC for attending our meeting tonight at our request to provide some information around bear interaction and activity within Anmore. I'm really glad to see that we've got the committee members here, as well as some members of the public who are invited to join as well. So they're here to discuss bear conflict prevention, some of the bear activity that's happened in Anmore over the past few years, and talk about what the Conservation Officer Service of BC does as well. So thanks everyone for keeping your mics and your cameras off for now. The presentation itself is going to be about 20 minutes long, and then Officer Miller and Officer Stark will provide an opportunity for questions to be asked. And so if you could just keep yourself muted until you want to ask a question, you can either use the raise hand function through Zoom, or if you're not sure what that is, you can just unmute yourself and just indicate that you'd like to ask a question at the end of the presentation. Question and comments that are going to be directed to the presenters. Obviously, we want to ensure that with any guests that we have, that we're asking respectful questions and making those comments. And then following that, there will be one further agenda item for this joint meeting, which Mayor McEwen will speak to briefly. But with that, I think I will turn it over. I'd like to introduce Officer Chris Miller and Officer Alicia Stark, who are joining us tonight, and they're going to run through a presentation. So I believe I can provide you with access to share your screen. It's not allowing me to do that. So I think what I'll do, Officer Miller indicated earlier, is I will share my screen. If you just let me know to advance the slides, then I can do that on your behalf.
I might be able to do it from my end too. Let me know if this works.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. I think I'll just enter slideshow view here. All right. So thanks for having us. Thanks to Julie for setting this up. So my name's Chris. I'm a conservation officer. I cover from Belcarra to Harrison Lake. Beside me is Acting Sergeant Alicia Stark. She's in charge of that area. Currently, we're the only two conservation officers for that whole area. We have someone off on leave, and we've lost a couple to lateral transfer this year. So we're hoping to get some more staff, maybe later on in the spring. That's up in the air, but we're hoping. So we're going to talk about bear conflict in Anmore specifically. So we'll just go over a bit of a background. I've got some statistics that we've provided for the past 3 years for Anmore specifically. We'll talk about conflict prevention and attractant management. We'll talk about reporting conflicts and why it's important. We'll go into some bear safety tips. And then just before questions at the end, we'll talk about the roles of a conservation officer, when we're getting these reports, what we're doing with them, that kind of thing.
Chris, if I could just highlight for your presentation, it's still in the edit mode. And I think the first slide there, I'm not sure if that's your intent.
I'm still on the first slide.
I think this is what they're seeing there, where you can see the next slide, I think.
Also, we're just getting a little bit of feedback that you're coming through quite quietly.
Okay.
So I don't have the ability to either raise your voice a little bit or turn up your volume.
Sure. We'll just make sure to speak loudly. We're wearing the mask too, which kind of lowers the volume, muffles a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's already much better. Yeah.
Okay. As for the screen, so are you seeing the outline screen right now?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay. And if I switch to that, it's the background screen?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just do it from this view then. So I'll hand it over to Alicia just to provide a little background. And go ahead.
All right. So there's numerous reasons that, we have bear conflict. So bear conflict occurs as a result of human development in bear habitat. I mean, we're all residents of, the Lower Mainland and Anmore. There's, development everywhere. We can see it happening in various municipalities around. So there's definitely development happening within these bears habitat. Careless attractant management, which we'll definitely get into more throughout the presentation, allowing bears to become comfortable around people. So that's kind of the main thing that we're looking to avoid, right? So we're going to give some tips and some tricks through this presentation of how we can make it so that these bears do not become comfortable around people. That's the key. That's really kind of our whole job, is to ensure that that doesn't happen. We want to keep these bears wild. And then bears being highly food motivated. I'm sure you guys noticed through the fall getting towards hibernation time, there's definitely a higher food motivation in the bears. That's just an example of times that these bears can, do a little bit extra to get the food that they're looking for. We definitely have an increase in calls that time of year because of that. So we'll touch on that as well. And then public safety risk increases as the bear habituation increases. So that's our big thing that we're trying to avoid, is bears and people, there being a safety risk, not even just, an attack or anything like that. Just even the fact that there could be a risk to people's safety is what we're really trying to avoid. So throughout the presentation, we're going to give tips and tricks on how to really avoid that. And then we'll explain how we come in and can help out with that as well.
So just a few photos for you. Basically, this is the problem. What leads to bears coming into conflict with people, Alicia just talked about it, but careless attractant management is one of the big ones. You know, in that first picture there, you can see we got a bear right upside this person's house getting into the garbage. We also see a garage door there. So my question is, why aren't those bins in the garage? So we'll talk about, you know, attractant management and that kind of thing, but this is the root of the problem. You know, we're in these bears' habitat. We just need to coexist, and eliminating attractants is a huge part of that. It can lead to, in extreme circumstances, the picture on the right here, this is where a bear actually broke into a house by smashing the window and climbing in while the people were inside sleeping. Weren't sleeping for very long after the smash, but so obviously some pretty high risk behavior is what it can lead to. Again, a bear went into a house. There's a nice gift that it left for somebody right in their living room. Luckily, these people weren't home, but you can imagine just what the outcome could have been, right? If these people were home at the time that this bear climbed through. This is another instance where it went through the window, and this one, it actually slid open the window with its paw and then climbed through. So. And then with our vehicles, you guys in Anmore have had some issues recently with bears breaking into vehicles, you know, trying door handles. If they're open, they get in. If they're locked, a lot of the times the door handles are coming right off. So, and we've seen a lot of that in Anmore as well as Belcarra. This photo is in Port Moody, so not too far away, but obviously some significant damage can occur. So. And it's not, you know, it's not just windows and cars are getting into, you know, they can do some serious damage. The strength of these animals is pretty impressive. In this case, they ripped a hole right through a wooden garage door to get inside to a deep freeze where food was being stored in a deep freezer. So their sense of smell is just parallel to none, or unparalleled, I should say. And it's, you know, it drives them. Like we said, they're so highly food motivated. So when they smell that, they're gonna stop at nothing to get in. And this was a closed deep freeze where honey was being stored in jars. So pretty interesting stuff. But it all comes back to the picture on the right. You know, bears in garbage. That's a huge source of the issue. So yeah, we'll talk about, you know, how we can avoid that.
All right, so this screen, we just put together a list of our statistics for the last few years with Anmore. So you'll see first the list of the number of reports. So that's overall reports that we've gotten in 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021. All equaling a total of 138 reports. After that, you see the attended column. So those are the ones that the officers physically attended the location. So out of that 138, 21 calls we physically attended. Again, we'll go into it further down when we explain what we do and everything like that. Where we'll kind of break down what determines if we attended, what determines if we don't attend it, and how we deal with things if it's not being attended to. No matter what, if we get a report, we have to deal with it in some way. We'll get into that further, but this is strictly on-site attendance, 21 out of 138. Destroyed, this is our absolute last result for anything. 3 bears. So out of that 138 total calls, 3 bears were destroyed, unfortunately. Hazed, 1 bear, and then cubs to rehab, 1 as well.
So I'll just mention too, you know, we get a lot of negative feedback, and there's misinformation out there, which causes a lot of people to think that we're just out there, you know, we're we're gunslingers. We're just out there to kill bears. Well, it couldn't be farther from the truth. As you can see in these numbers for your village there, in 3 years, we've only had to put 3 bears down there. But we had 138 reports that there were bears there. So obviously that's not the case. You know, we're not monitoring social media to see if there's reports of bears. You know, if you post on social media that there's a bear around, we're not going to come and shoot it. That's just a bit of a, it's unfortunate that kind of misinformation is out there. A lot of people have made a lot of assumptions, and it's just untrue.
In the end, none of us get into this career to put bears down. What we get into this career for is helping the wildlife stay wild and helping the people stay safe.
And for stopping poachers.
Yes, stopping poachers. That's the other side of it.
So moving right along, we'll get into some conflict prevention and attractant management. So this is the what can you do section. I kind of stole Smokey and the Bear, only you can prevent wildfires. Well, this one's only you can prevent bear conflicts. So things you can do are securing all your attractants. We'll get into that. We'll get into how to scare bears away safely, and we'll get into reporting conflicts as well. But those 3 big things, you know, really take it upon yourselves. Those are things that you can do to prevent wildlife from coming into conflict, which ultimately is going to prevent bears from being destroyed. Which, like we said earlier, is the absolute last resort, and it's the last thing we want to do. We never want to do it. So we'll get into some attractants here. So this photo we took from WildSafe BC. We work closely with WildSafe BC on a lot of things. Very good source of information. If you have any questions about safety tips around wildlife, you can always go there to find that out. As well as how to prevent conflicts. There's some further information in there. A lot of good info about electric fencing, which we'll talk about briefly here. But Alicia, do you want to start us off?
For sure. So for securing all attractants, so keep garbage and compost bins in a garage or a locked shed. I would say this is the thing that we come across the most. Bears gotten into garbage. You know, lots of homes have garages or detached garages. That's the best place to keep the garbage in it. For compost, you know, we recommend, I guess that's further down, freezing the compost. I know one kind of feedback we get when we ask people to put their garbage into their garage is maybe the smell, or if you keep the cars in the garage. There's things that we can do to take down that smell, which we'll get into. So only place bins at the curb the morning of the collection. You know, the night before seems like it is convenient for everybody, but then that's a whole night that a bear can feed on that garbage. And if one house has it or 3 houses on the street, that's 3 free meals for this bear. So super important before you're headed out to work or you're taking the kids to the bus stop. That's a great time to take those bins out to the curb just to make sure the least amount of time that those bins are on the curb from time of put out to pick up is the best. Freeze food waste until collection. So that I was getting into that with the compost. You know, compost can, you know, have some bugs or a smell with it. So if you're putting that, you know, the food waste into maybe a freezer bag or a container and in your freezer until the day of pickup, that's one way to keep it, the smell down and the rot and things like that down. Routinely wash out your bins. So we recommend after every pickup day, give it a good rinse. Maybe use some bleach in there to really get that smell down. That's going to really cut down the smell in the garage or the smell in a shed. And as well as when you've got the garbage out on the curbside, cut down the smell of weeks previous garbage in there as well. Okay.
The other thing with washing out bins, you can use vinegar and baking soda with water as well. If you don't have bleach, bleach is good too. You know, if you're not doing it after each time, that's fine. Just you'll see if it's starting to stink, or if you got you know, a little bit of residue in there. That's the big thing that produces that smell, is the greasy, moldy residue in these bins. So that accumulates over time. So we're just asking that you wash out your bins to keep them nice and clean and free of smell. The other thing we'll get into here is fruit. So we all like to have fruit trees, whether it's for fruit that you're using for preservatives or whatever, or, you know, you just like the look of them. You just got to make sure to pick the fruit when it's ripe, because these bears are out there looking for that stuff as well. And yes, that's a natural food source. However, it's a human source food source in the sense that that food source is going to be associated with people, because they're usually right up at our houses, in our yards, you know, where our kids play. We don't want to encourage these bears to come into the yard and get into this, yes, natural food source, but it's a human food source because they associate it with us. So pick the right fruit, you know, as soon as it's ripe. And the other thing is when you've got fruit falling on the ground, if you're leaving it there to rot, the smell is, it starts to accumulate. And yeah, I mean, it's 1 + 1 = 2. The bears are going to smell that and come in for it. So if you're not using the fruit, maybe you take down the tree altogether. If the fruit is just falling every year, rotting on the ground, you don't have the capacity to pick it up. You know, maybe you're not physically capable of doing that. Maybe you don't have someone that can come and do it for you. Well, I would look at removing the tree altogether. And that can help to keep these bears wild. That's, you know, something you can do to do your part. And then we'll get into bird feeders here too. So bird feeders, yeah, we like to feed the birds. They don't need our help. They're a huge bear attractant. Like I was saying about their sense of smell, they can smell birdseed. Well, birdseed doesn't really smell to people, not much anyways, but bears can smell it from quite far away, and it's quite high in calories. And the bears seem to know that. So they focus on bird feeders quite a bit in the fall when they're coming into hibernation. You know, they're trying to build up their fat stores for the winter. So bird feed is a big no-no. We recommend just removing the bird feeders altogether. And we recommend it year round, because down here, bears don't have to hibernate. If it doesn't get cold enough, if there's still food available, they won't even go down for the winter. So, you know, it's very possible that we've got bears active all year down here. Last year for sure we did. And yeah, I'm sure we'll be seeing calls throughout this winter as well. So keeping the bird feeders down inside. Barbecues should be kept clean as well. You know, the grease trap in there, a lot of people forget about that grease trap. Make sure to clean that out, but the grill itself, really wash it off after every use, making sure to burn that stuff off. Pet food, we want to feed pets indoors. You never want to see pet food sitting outside. You're just asking for bears to come up onto your decks or onto your porch. Yeah, it's just, you know, something you can do inside. So a very easy way to reduce attractants. Do you want to talk about livestock?
Yeah. So secure all livestock with electric fencing, whether you've got some backyard chickens or a hobby farm of sorts, just some animals. We recommend, you know, having that electric fencing. That's the one proven thing we have that for sure keeps bears out of these livestock enclosures. We also, with that comes the feed. So you have to feed your animals. We want to make sure that the feed is also kept in a secure location as well. That's, again, a really easy food source for these animals. Again, the animals may seem like a natural food source. They're naturally used to eating animals, things like that. But again, that's associated with people. And once they've had some there, the likelihood of them coming back is really high. Like in the end, all of these attractants are a free and easy food source for them. I mean, bears, much like us, you know, we're going to do what we can for an easy meal, right? If I was offered a free buffet instead of going home after work and cooking up dinner for the family, of course, I would take the free buffet, right? And so essentially the food, the garbage on the sidewalk, or the garbage in your yard, or the fruit on the trees or the fruit on the ground, that's all a free buffet to these bears.
Okay, so we'll get into scaring bears away from your home from a position of safety. So this is a big point, the position of safety. We want you, if you're going to be scaring bears away from your home, we want to make sure that you're doing it from a safe location. So we're going to give you some tips here, but you know, make sure that if you are utilizing these tips, that you're doing it in a safe manner from, you know, somewhere like an elevated deck. Maybe it's from a second story window. Perhaps you're in your car, or maybe you're at a doorway where you have the ability to get inside very easily, just in case something goes wrong. So big things are making lots of noise. You want to bang pots and pans, throw things toward the bear if you can. Bear bangers are a big one. You can get them at, you know, Cabela's. Canadian Tire sells them, I believe. A lot of other sporting goods places will sell them. You can get them online as well. And car alarms are a big one. If you got a bear in your driveway and you have one of those fobs, a battery operated fob, just set off the car alarm. You can spray the bear with a hose if you've got one up on your deck, or, you know, somewhere where it's safe for you to do that. And the big thing with these is always provide an escape route for the bear. You never want to corner it. You don't want it to get defensive. You want it to just be able to get out of there if it feels the need to run, which is the goal. That's what you're hoping for. And then I've got this note here, yell. We want you to yell to make sure that this negative interaction is being associated with people. If you spray a hose at a bear and you don't really make any sound, it's not going to associate that with you. So we want to make sure that you're yelling, you know, hey bear, go away bear, whatever you got to yell, just so that they're associating all this stuff with people. So like we said, only do that if it's safe to do so. Go ahead.
All right, reporting conflicts and why it's important. So information about wildlife in urban areas. It provides the COS with knowledge of areas to increase education and enforcement. It may allow for response efforts before the animal becomes dependent on non-natural food sources. So we can easily track the reports that are coming in and identify, you know, what bear is showing signs of getting away from that non-natural food source. It allows officers to track the activity over time for targeting outreach efforts to reduce wildlife conflicts. And then the RAP line information, so the RAP lines are reporting line. The information from the RAP line is also shared with our friends at WildSafe BC and other community outreach programs that work towards reducing conflicts, like the WARP map, which is through WildSafe BC. All of our RAP line reports go onto that WARP map. So reporting helps to keep people safe.
Yeah, a lot of times if it's a public safety risk, even if you're unsure if there's a risk or not, calling, you know, hand that information over to us so that we can make the determination if there's a public safety risk there or not. But yeah, in the end, you want to do your part in the community and keep each other safe. So reporting is a huge thing. And here's the line. So it's the report all poachers and polluters line. It's also for reporting wildlife conflicts, and it's a 24/7 number. So the number is on the screen here, 1-877-952-7277, which spells RAP. So bear safety in the wild, we're going to throw this in there because this is the information that you're going to see on somewhere like WildSafe BC. It's more for when you're hiking in the wilderness and you encounter a bear. The other tips we told you were for around your home, how to scare a bear off and what to do if you've got a bear around your home. Well, a bear in the wild is going to be a totally different animal. So we want to make sure that you're carrying bear spray. Don't hike alone. Should never approach a bear. If you do encounter a bear, make yourself big, back away slowly. You want to avoid direct eye contact. You don't want to challenge the bear at all. Speak calmly. You want to just, say things like, it doesn't matter what you say, but hey bear, I'm not a threat. And you back away slowly. And then we want you to understand what assertive behavior looks like, and be ready to deploy your bear spray in these circumstances where you're seeing that. So we do have a couple of videos here that will just show you of assertive behavior. Bears asserting dominance are going to show things like frontal body orientation. They're going to be trying to maintain direct eye contact with you, huffing or blowing, which you'll hear in this video if the sound works for us. Jaw popping is, that's the sound you'll hear, is the jaw popping or the teeth clacking. So let me know if you can hear this, Julie.
Yeah, we can hear that.
Play it a couple times, so it's at the end there. So that's, this bear is agitated. It's asserting dominance. Maybe it's being defensive. That's not necessarily aggression, but it's good to understand that behavior, because if you do encounter a bear in the wild and it does start to do that, make sure that you've got your finger on the trigger on that bear spray. I've got one more video here. So the bear, if it's asserting dominant behavior, it's going to be standing its ground. It's going to be potentially swatting at the ground, lunging towards you by taking a couple steps forward. It usually ends with a slap to the ground. And bluff charging is more aggressive. So that's certainly when you're going to want to be getting your bear spray ready.
All right, so on to conservation officer roles. So these are just some of the things that we do day to day. So analyze reports and determine appropriate response. So like we showed in that previous slide, there was 138 reports over that 3-year period. So of all, we saw all of those 138 reports. We analyzed every single one of them to determine if it warranted a callback, if it was a sighting, or if it involved actual response to it, in-person response. So maybe no action required, sighting only. We still appreciate the sighting only ones, because that allows us to know where the wildlife is. It helps us keep up with it. We cover such a huge area. It helps us know what's going on in each location. Public safety. Risk, the determining factor in the response. So public safety is our #1 mandate in everything we do as a conservation officer. Public safety is our #1. So as soon as we see that there could be a threat to public safety, we will be there and we will have the resources to deal with it, whatever it may be. If public safety is present, here's some of the things that we can do. Hazing and aversion techniques, whether it be rubber bullets, bear bangers, things like that. We're specially trained in those kind of things and are prepared to use them. Relocation in certain circumstances. In the end, it's our biologists through the province that determine what is, I guess,
which bears can be relocated.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of circumstances that they take into play. So in some circumstances, relocation is the best option. Removal of conflict animals only when necessary. This is our absolute last response, and we will do everything we can up until that point to ensure that this is our absolute last response. Like I said before, none of us get into this line of work to have to put down animals. All of us are animal lovers, and we get into this to protect the resource. Then follow up with enforcement when possible. If we've had to remove a bear from an area, I can guarantee you we will have officers out there the next day, maybe even that night, knocking on doors, looking for garbage, looking for potential attractants, and writing tickets. That's a guarantee.
when possible. So
Yeah.
tickets aren't always possible. We still are bound by the law. We have to be able to prove an offense has occurred. So it's not always possible. So, you know, we say we guarantee that we're gonna, you know, follow up with enforcement, but the big thing is when possible.
Yeah.
We can't always guarantee a ticket's gonna be issued. But there's nothing I like more than being able to hold people responsible and accountable for, you know, a bear having to be put down. Well, if it's because of someone's careless attractant management, you know, we really like to hold those people accountable. And then the other thing we do is public outreach and education, such as this, what we're doing today. We can do school talks, you know, other kind of outreach. We'll do attractant audits. We did one in Anmore in December, and you know, that's kind of the door-to-door stuff, providing you know, education, but we're also looking for attractant issues there, so we can try and mitigate that. We also work with Wild Safe BC, and each municipality, you know, may have well, not each municipality. Some municipalities will have a Wild Safe BC coordinator or otherwise. In your community, I've been in touch with Julie, so we try and maintain a relationship with the municipality so we can work together to reduce conflict. So going forward, we'd really like to see you know, us and Anmore keep up that really good relationship, and you know, but it's a two-way street, so we need to know where these issues are so that we can deal with them, which is why reporting is so important. And yeah, so we talked about the removal being the last resort. Just know that if you do see in the media that, you know, there's been a bear put down, well, don't make assumptions that we're going there just because we heard there was a bear there and we're going to put it down. There's been a huge history behind that incident. So anytime we're doing that, it is the last resort. Other options may have been exercised, but you know, maybe the first report we got was that it attacked somebody. And that's, you know, a lot of the times when people don't report, our options are very limited because those bears are already at a point where they're entering houses. Like the family unit in Anmore in December opened 2 doors using the handle to get inside a house that was occupied. It was 9 p.m. at night. You know, people are active at that time of night. They're not sleeping. These people were in the kitchen. The bear was in the kitchen. The dog ended up scaring it out, thankfully. But these are situations that, you know, have led, a lot of the behavior goes unreported, and it leads to us having no options. You know, we did set traps for those. We did not capture the offending animals there. So they seem to have denned up for now and are probably in the green space, not too far away, just denning up for the winter. So that's why it's really important coming in the spring here to make sure that all the attractants are secure so that when these bears are coming back out, they're not getting into anything. So this is the end of the presentation where we'll go to questions. So I don't know if it's a physical raise hand or if there's a raise hand function that you can use in Zoom, but identify to the moderator that you have a question and then they'll unmute you. We do have a time limit, so just please keep questions centered to the topic that we've discussed, and just try to keep it brief. We won't get to everyone likely. We may. So if we don't get to you though, just email the Conservation Officer Service at this email. It's conservation.officer.service@gov.bc.ca. You can send your questions there and just include your name and location, but we will try to get to everybody. And for further safety tips and conflict prevention strategies, go to wildsafebc.com. So Julie, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, both of you. That was a fulsome presentation and had a lot of really good information in it. I don't currently have anybody who has raised their hands. I did have one question that was posed regarding tickets in Anmore. I'm not sure if it's specific to tickets the municipality would have issued or whether or not they would have been the ones that you were referring to earlier in your presentation. And also whether or not conservation keeps statistics on cougar sightings as well. So maybe you can answer the latter first about the cougar sightings.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So this presentation was solely around bears, but we do all the same efforts for cougars. So we definitely keep track of all the cougar sightings, and we do very similar follow-up with each cougar sighting as well. Very aware that there's some very active cougars right now. So yeah, we've got all the same practices in place. Unfortunately, this presentation was just about bears.
Yeah, it's the important thing is that cougars are active in these areas that we're living. They're cougar habitat as well. A lot of times they're just moving through. They may be feeding on their prey species like raccoons and squirrels, but and deer as well, which you have a lot of in Anmore. So we are going to get cougar conflict there. But yes, we do keep track of that as well. It's rare that we have to get involved because cougars becoming aggressive towards people is extremely rare. So if they're just, reporting sightings and stuff like that, it's not necessarily going to result in us attending. We do get a lot of calls across our zone, so we may not even be able to call back just because of resources. Like I said, we're the only two. We get thousands of calls each year in our zone for human wildlife conflict, thousands for bears alone. So it is tough to call everybody back, but just know that reporting is important, just in case we do, note that there is a public safety risk. But yeah, so cougar stuff is tracked as well. Thanks for the question.
Perfect. And I've got a couple of hands up I'll come back to in a second. And if everybody could try to ask their questions through the raise hand or unmuting. I see a couple other questions coming through on the chat function. It's difficult for me to be able to keep track of everything while running the meeting. So just in terms of the other part of that initial question with the tickets, in 2020, the Village of Anmore paid for a part-time bylaw officer to do some canvassing through the summer months of carts that were left out too early with a focus on education. There weren't any tickets that were issued by the municipality in 2020, but I know that council was keen to discuss what fines would look like going forward in 2021 following that education campaign in the summer of last year. I don't know, Chris, if you are aware of any enforcement tickets that would have been issued through the Conservation Officer Service.
I didn't prepare those stats, but yeah, a lot of times we do rely on the municipalities as partners. Bylaw agencies across our zone within each municipality are huge partners for us. We can't issue tickets to a person that has already received a charge for a certain incident from another agency. So if bylaw tickets somebody, we can't go in and ticket them as well
for the same offense.
We do have the ability to charge for, if someone's just leaving attractants unsecured, where it could attract dangerous wildlife being bears, cougars, wolves, and coyotes. Then yes, we can certainly take it for those things. I don't have the stats available, unfortunately, but just know that if the offense is there, we're going to charge for it where possible. But like I was saying earlier, it's not always possible.
Great, thank you very much. I believe Councillor Weberink had his hand up first, so go ahead, please, Councillor Weberink.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this. Obviously, there's still hunting licenses issued in BC, and you keep track of all that. Did the amount of bears that are destroyed due to human conflict just get deducted from the amount of licenses you issue the next year? Is it kind of like a balance?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So no, it doesn't really work like that. We don't control how many hunting licenses are given out. That's all the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations, the wildlife technicians, wildlife biologists. We call them the wildlife branch, so they're in charge of all that kind of stuff. If there's a certain number of bears destroyed one year, it's not going to result in less hunting licenses the next year, just based on the fact that there's not there's not a maximum number of licenses that are given out. Our hunting population can all buy a license for a bear. It's province-wide. They're not, necessarily broken up by, if you're buying a bear tag, it's for the whole province. So it doesn't affect how many hunting licenses are given out the next year. Hunter success is used as a way of knowing, in an area, if they need to close a hunt. It is managed regionally in that way. So if there is a population that is in decline in a certain region, they may not allow hunting for that region for X amount of years, to allow the population to recover. The black bear population in BC is extremely well off. It's a very healthy population, but I don't want to get too much into the ecology and the biology and the status of populations. That's all going to be questions for wildlife biologists, and they're a separate ministry from us. So thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. I do have a question that was on the chat by somebody who doesn't have a microphone available, so I am going to ask that question. And the question is, can you share any information respecting the attractant audit you did in Anmore in December?
So we didn't come across any offenses that warranted a charge in that audit. So there was a lot of information given, and we talked to a lot of people, but no tickets were issued, no warnings, because we didn't find what we thought we might find. In doing these attractant audits, we usually do find issues, but we were actually pleasantly surprised to see that there was a lot of attractants that were secured, whether it's in a garage or in a shed. And with that attractant audit, we only focused on areas where that family unit had been active and we knew about. So yeah, it didn't result in any charges, but a lot of education, and it was good to get out there and go door to door and talk to people. So
Great.
Just has to step out to take a call.
Sure. Great. Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to Elaine Willis next with a question.
Thank you. And thank you for that very fulsome presentation. I believe you may have answered my 2 questions during your presentation, but I just want to confirm. There is an expectation that every sighting is reported. Is that correct?
No, not necessarily. So you're going to see a lot of bears in the village of Anmore. We're not asking that you report every sighting. The big thing is if you perceive that there may be a public safety risk, if you see a bear in someone's yard in the middle of the day, you may want to report that. But if you see a bear cross a road into a green space, no, you don't have to report those kind of things. That's not going to get action from us. We're just going to write it off as a sighting only. So no, it's not necessary. But if you're unsure if there's a public safety risk or not, let us make that determination.
Okay, so I'm a little unclear then. So I thought I heard someone say that having the sightings recorded helps you map out where the bears are. So really it is only potential conflict that is being recorded. Is that correct?
So the things that are being recorded, if people call in a sighting of a bear crossing the road, that still goes into our database, and we do still see that information. While it's not necessary to report every sighting, we still do use sightings to determine, if there's a bear active in an area, if it's in a community and we determine that there's, the potential for that bear is maybe going to access some attractants, we can mobilize our response options that way and try to mitigate those risks. But yeah, a lot of the calls that we get that we're tracking this information, a lot of people are calling saying there's a bear in garbage, there's a bear in my neighbor's yard, eating fruit. So it's a sighting, but there's usually conflict related to it. We do get reports of just straight wildlife sightings only. And that's, like I said, that's good. We do like to know, but it's not necessary every time.
Okay, so you do like that information though. So,
yep.
Okay. And the other one that I believe you answered is that the bears here really don't hibernate. So our last few years of seeing them at any time of year, even when there's snow, is an expectation that we should have, that basically our bears are year-round bears. Is that correct?
So it's going to vary year to year. What I said was, while bears in the Lower Mainland don't have to hibernate every year. Right now, a lot of bears are down because of how cold it is. They're down for their naps. So our calls have dropped off significantly, and it's because of because it got cold enough that the bears anticipated snow, which covers food sources. So that's why bears hibernate. And they don't have to hibernate in the Lower Mainland every year, because it usually doesn't get this cold. Or, last year was significant as well, -9, I think it got to. But on our average year, it's not going to get super cold. You may have bears active year round.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I've got 2 more hands up, and in the interest of time, I'm going to just limit the questions to those next 2. But as Chris mentioned, if you do have questions that don't get answered tonight, feel free to send an email to the email address that's on the screen. And the village will also take note of that if there's any further queries. But I'll turn it over to Phoenix Monroe first, and then end up with Mayor McEwen after that. We can hear you. Yeah, you're a bit faint.
Not to give way to the lashback that you addressed earlier in social media.
Sorry, I'm going to have to just interject because it's very difficult to make out your question.
Okay, if I could try to put down in the chat, then I could answer after this next question.
Sure. Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you. So I'll look for that in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Mayor McEwen in the meantime.
Yeah, Chris, I just wanted to thank you and your service for what you provide for the village, and with really limited resources. As you said, you're all the way from Belcarre to Harrison, which is quite an area and a lot of residents to be dealing with. So I really appreciate the work that you do and how your service level that you provided us in Anmore. I just wanted to know, as a municipality, how are we rating in regards to the job that we're doing? And as a council, I can tell you, we're trying to do everything we can within reason, and understanding that, some people are having to leave a little earlier for work, so they have to put their garbage out. We're trying to, educate as best we can. It's sort of our policy, rather than finding people in that. But as a municipality, are we, being right on the doorsteps of Mother Nature, are we sort of doing for a fairly good job?
Yeah, thanks, John. So we have noticed actually that Anmore is, significantly lower conflict than the rest of our zone. Yes, it's a smaller area, but like you said, you're on the doorstep of the wilderness there. So there's a high potential for a lot of conflict to occur. That being said, it's tough to gauge if we're not getting the reports. I know that a lot of people in the Lower Mainland refuse to call us, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, the conflict it does seem to be low relative to the rest of our zone. And yeah, we have noticed that the attractant issues are nowhere near as bad as other parts of the zone. So we appreciate all the municipality's efforts as well as the residents. We do still have conflict. A lot of those conflicts are bears in garbage and but it's something that we can control, and it's just going to continue to take ongoing efforts to do so. So yeah, like I said, thanks to all the residents for doing your part. And if we do have high risk situations that we need to deal with, it's don't take it as that the municipality has done a bad job. Some things are inevitable. We just have to do what we can as a community, which is like the things we talked about in this presentation. So yeah, thank you to everyone there.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with, and I know we're here about bear aware, but we've had a bunch of recent cougar activity. And then this past summer, we had a neighbor of mine, dog was taken right out of the backyard. the traumatic experience for all living in the house was terrible. But I can tell you that the attention that conservation did in regards to tracking that down and working with the family was amazing. And I just want to thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there are situations where cougars are taking pets, it's not always going to result in us trying to track down that cougar. A lot of times, you know, it's going to be inevitable if you're allowing dogs and cats to roam outdoors. If you're going into these wilderness areas like Bunsen Lake recently and you're allowing your dog to be off leash, you have to accept the risk that there may be, you know, something that happens. So these little dogs and cats are prey species. Essentially, they just look like a little furry snack to these cougars. So we can't fault the cougar for that too much if we're you know, allowing them to be off leash and run around these cougars' habitat. When there is, you know, a cougar that's coming into your yard repeatedly and, you know, it's around people more, you know, it's a little different than a Bunsen Lake situation there. But, you know, we assess the risk all the time. And yeah, it's always very unfortunate to hear. I have a dog and cat myself and Alicia does too. So it always breaks our hearts to hear that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're happy to respond when we can. Sometimes that kind of thing is inevitable though.
Great, thank you. So I do see the chat question here from Phoenix Monroe. I'll just read it out. It says, acknowledging that your services are very well warranted, I hope you might be willing to give some voice to some of the limitations the Conservation Service has within the framework of the government's funding, etc. And you spoke to that a little bit at the beginning, and how we may try to make a greater difference for our bears and preventing their destruction through protesting to the appropriate government bodies providing funding or otherwise. I think that probably in regards to answering that specific question, it may be outside of your wheelhouse. I think, you know, maybe focusing on how residents can make a greater difference. I think you've covered off in your presentation today in terms of what individuals can do.
Yeah, so thanks, Julie. Thanks. Was it Phoenix? Thanks, Phoenix, for the question. Alicia and I are, you know, field level boots on the ground, so we're not really equipped to answer that. For that kind of inquiry, we would recommend just emailing the Conservation Officer Service email there on the screen. And that's a bit of a higher level response that I think we can't answer at this level.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, like I said, we really appreciate you accepting our invitation to come and provide this information tonight. It's been very, very useful, and we've got this recorded so that we can share the presentation for those who weren't able to attend tonight. The village does also have links for BC Conservation Officer Service as well as WildSafe BC on our website for residents to be able to refer to. And again, we really appreciate your service and your time tonight.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.